Look at the weather.
It's beautiful here.
Non-stop rain.
Oh, man, it is a blazer out there.
It's cold and it's shivery.
It is cold.
Really coming down here.
I really enjoy your weather reports.
From the All Indiana Podcast Network, we're talking weather in a whole new way. From historical events to what's coming up, plus weather news, science, safety, fun facts, and more.
I like where this is going.
This is Weather Weekly. Weather Weekly with Wish TV Storm Track 8 meteorologist Marcus Bailey.
Welcome back. Weather Weekly here as we are going through the last week of July. Where is the time going? Good to be with you here as we're getting closer. We're already halfway through the summer months now. Episode number 24 of Weather Weekly. It's great to have you along. I'm meteorologist Marcus Bailey from Wish TV in Indianapolis. Quick episode here today. I mean, it's been such a quiet weather pattern. I figured we're going to start kind of jumping on some of these unique weather phenomenon that we don't talk about a lot. And I'll talk more about this, but Randy Ellis, my colleague here, longtime Wish TV meteorologist, legendary meteorologist here in Indianapolis, did a Facebook Live because he caught a little landspout on, I believe it was Sunday, this past weekend here. And so I kind of want to talk a little bit about that because sometimes there's confusion on what a landspout is, and it goes by a few different names. Sometimes you'll get tornado warnings that are triggered in various counties and that kind of stuff. So I want to spend some time on that. And I have a little story for you, too, about kind of my experience with a landspout as well. That's kind of funny. So we'll talk about that here. But I do want to get to some weather headlines before we talk about landspouts here after the break. First off, locally, this was hard to believe because we've been running, we've had a few hot days in the month of July. And look, July we typically think is right squarely in the hot part of our summer season. We've had some cooler days as well, but just yesterday, so I'm recording this on the 27th, it's a Tuesday, so Monday the 26th, we finally hit our first 90-degree day for the month of July. Hard to believe. We usually average, I think, right around 5 or 6 days typically for a month of July, and we just had our first one. Now, we're probably going to see several here before the week is up, which we'll talk more about in the forecast at the end of the podcast. But I guess better late than never, although many of you are probably not, sad about the fact that we haven't hit that many 90-degree days here for the month of July. But I just kind of want to look on how our average temperatures are doing here. We've only hit 90 times, 90 or higher, I should say, 6 times in Indianapolis officially, where we should be averaging closer to 20 for an entire summer season. And again, the summer defined meteorologically speaking, just to kind of keep all the records nice and organized so it doesn't follow the calendar, the solstices or the equinoxes or anything like that. June 1st to the end of August. And that is your definition of the summer season that the Weather Service will kind of keep tabs on. All right. So dating back to June 1st, I believe our average temperature is at 74.4. Now that is running about, if you run the average of basically the whole 150 years, that is running about a half a degree above average. I didn't look to see where it stands in the new 30-year average. Remember, if you look back at our podcast with Mike Ryan with this year, entering 2021, now we've shifted to a new decade in terms of our 30-year average. So that may change here, but I'd say we're kind of in the middle of the pack. When I look at the records here, I'm looking at them right now. It's 61st out of, I believe, 150. So 151, I should say. So, we're right kind of in the middle. I wouldn't say that there's anything exceptional with our average temperature. So, probably running a little bit cool. I know June was running cooler than normal. So far, July, for the most part, has been running a little bit below average as well. So, and just kind of showing that we haven't had that many 90-degree days, I think just kind of shows you that as well. So nothing real significant outside of that here in central Indiana. We have stayed severe weather free for the most part. We had a couple of warnings with a cold front kind of diving down here but didn't have any significant amounts of rainfall over this past weekend, with a little front kind of moving through. And now we're entering kind of a dry stretch here after a soaking start to the month of July. Now on the back half, we're kind of starting to dry things out. Nationally and internationally speaking, still have the wildfires, a huge problem out west. Of course, we had the big fire out in southern Oregon. They're starting to try to get that contained. We've got another large fire in Northern California that's causing some big problems here. The Dixie Fire. And it's merging with another fire there. So, yeah, some big problems in Northern California because of that. The other interesting thing, because I know many people are now tuned into the Olympics, that opening ceremonies was last Friday, and a lot of events. My wife and I, kids, have been watching a lot of events over the past weekend and here over the last couple of days. There was actually a tropical system that is taking aim on Japan. It's Tropical Storm Nepertak is the name of it. It has weakened to a tropical storm. Of course, now those when they reach what we would call hurricane status, those are classified as typhoons out there in the Pacific. And it looks like it's kind of more broad brushing Tokyo, which is where the vast majority of the events are being held. So it's more on the northern part of the island there, not the central part where Tokyo is located. But they have had to kind of reschedule a few events as they're getting some pretty good rains and some gusty winds with that tropical system that's moving on through. There's also a larger tropical storm, Infa, that is impacting highly populated areas of China. But again, that is also considered just a tropical storm right now, but very active there in the Pacific. We have really yet to see much going on over the last, couple of weeks out in the Atlantic. We've been very fortunate so far. And I mentioned, I think a couple of podcasts ago, that we had a pretty good pool of Saharan dust that was coming in off of Africa over the Atlantic. And anytime you do that's signaling the air is extremely dry. And that's death to any tropical system, tropical wave that's really trying to get going. And this time of year, you get into July and August, you usually start to see formation coming off waves of Africa. And then once you get a little bit later in the hurricane season, that's when you see a little bit more activity kind of bubbling up maybe around the Gulf or the southeastern Atlantic. Okay, so that's where we'll be watching that. And I think we're starting to get there. There is kind of an area that is very low probability of anything in terms of tropical formation, basically off the coast of Georgia. It's a 0% chance as I'm looking at it right now over the next 48 hours for anything significant in terms of development there. And it's very, very quiet over the Atlantic otherwise. So, hey, we like to see that. You know, we always like to have things to talk about, but it's good to have a non-impactful weather kind of taking shape over the lower 48 states after it was quite busy here kind of for the spring and the first half of the summer months. Okay, that's your update here, news-wise, locally and globally. Coming up, again, we're going to do a little science lesson here for you, talk about the differences between landspouts and tornadoes. That's coming up next here on Weather Weekly.
Audible's romance collection has something to satisfy every side of you. When it comes to what kind of romance you're into, you don't have to choose just one. Fancy a dalliance with a duke, or maybe a steamy billionaire. You could find a book boyfriend in the city and another one tearing it up on the hockey field. And if nothing on this earth satisfies, you can always find love in another realm. Discover modern rom-coms from authors like Lily Chu and Ali Hazelwood, the latest romantasy series from Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, plus Regency favorites like Bridgerton and Outlander. And of course, all the really steamy stuff. Your first great love story is free when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
Welcome back to episode number 24, Weather Weekly. Good to have you here. Before I get to today's subject matter, it's something I probably should have mentioned in headlines, and I just bypassed it, but I was going through my email. Starting on August 2nd, so that's going to be next week here, something you should be aware of. is the National Weather Service. Now, this is nationwide. Will start alerting via the WEA alerts. So those of you that are not familiar with that, WEA, WEA alerts, every smartphone basically has them now. You can go into your settings. You can actually turn them on and off. But typically, I think the only things that are warned right now via the WEA alerts are tornado warnings and blizzard warnings, I believe. Those are the only ones I've noticed. These are the kind of same things that you'll get, Amber alerts and that kind of thing. They're different because you can actually turn them off in different sequences. You can turn off Amber alerts, but you can leave on the weather alerts, the weather emergency alerts. So anyway, what's going to be new starting next week is the Weather Service is going to the way they word it here, severe thunderstorms deemed destructive will activate wireless emergency alerts, WEA, W-E-A, on smartphones. Criteria for destructive threat is at least 2.75 inches diameter hail and or 80 mile per hour thunderstorm winds. So the takeaway from this here, gang, is not every severe thunderstorm warning is going to fire a WEA alert, okay? So for those of you like, oh my gosh, we're going to get so many alerts on that. No, there's a pretty high threshold for the severe alerts. I mean, you got to be talking 80 mile per hour winds, or, you're talking, well over, you're talking closer over golf ball size hail, essentially. 2.5 inches is considered tennis ball size hail, and they are activating this at 2.75, so kind of close to that range. Tennis ball, baseball size hail, essentially at 2.75. So, I mean, it's a pretty extreme threshold. Now, obviously, this is going to be kind of experimental for the Weather Service to try. So they will fine-tune that as needed, but you don't get a lot of warnings around central Indiana where you're talking tennis ball size hail. I can think of one maybe in this year we did have one day where we had some pretty large hail, and you don't get 80 mile per hour wind thunderstorms very often either. So they will likely be as frequent, maybe even a little bit less frequent than tornado polygons and WEA alerts. But something you should be aware of, and I highly recommend that you make sure you have that activated on your phone. Just go to your phone settings, whether it be Apple or Android or anything like that. It is a useful tool. And again, I think they do blizzard warnings as well when those are issued. I remember I got one when there was a blizzard warning. I think the first iPhone I ever got, because previous phones didn't have the WEA alerts, and I had my phone connected to my car radio. It wasn't Bluetooth at that point. And I'm just listening, jamming to some tunes, heading into work. Knew that there could be a blizzard warning coming, but all of a sudden, I'm blaring the music, and I start hearing the emergency alert sound going. I'm like, what is this? That's not part of this song. Pearl Jam never played that. So just be aware that that's going to be something new that's going to be coming down starting August 2nd, so next week here. Okay, so subject matter for today, since we're in kind of a quiet weather pattern nationally here, but we have had some instances of this a few times this year. I've had some videos sent to me over the last month of what I call landspouts, but you can get it by a lot of names. You can get cold air funnels, you can get dust devils, you can get funnel clouds. It kind of comes with a bunch of different names, but I think what's an important takeaway here is that it's not a tornado. It's not the same thing as a tornado, although it could look like one. Randy Allis, my colleague, I mentioned this here in the beginning of the podcast. He was out live on Sunday. You're obviously not going to be able to see it via a podcast, but here's what he was kind of seeing here.
Okay. I don't know if you can see it or not. It's really hard to tell, but there's a cold air funnel that is, I'm not too far from McCordsville. There's a little shower out there. It's kind of dissipating, and boy, if you look to the left of the telephone poles, I should try to get closer to it, but it's kind of dissipating right now. Hard to see, but it is a little tiny cold air funnel. It's just dissipating. I wish I'd have gotten here a little bit earlier, but it's to the left of the trees. And yeah, it's dissipating. Oh, well, I was about 5 minutes too late in getting here, but it looks like it's going back up into the clouds right now. But at any rate, I'm out in the cornfields, bean fields here, just taking my little Sunday drive. I love doing this. And I saw on the radar there is a little shower just to the southeast of Indy, and coming down from the base of the cloud was a cold air funnel. So I missed it by about 3 or 4 minutes, and I was trying to have you guys see it. I'll go chase it a little bit here, and if it does come back down, I'll
go get it, Rand.
Stop and do a little Facebook Live. So
go get it, Rand.
We tried, but nothing severe. Won't touch down. Won't do any damage. This little rope-like funnel coming down, but it went back up. So see you later.
All right. So that was Randy. It was real riveting video. You can just imagine. No, I'm kidding. But they happened that quickly, though. He said, I was 5 minutes too late. He was out driving. He saw it, decided to pull over, get his Facebook Live going. By the time he got his phone out, Facebook Live, and I know Randy's older, but he is pretty savvy when it comes to doing Facebook Live. So it's not like he was fumbling around. It can happen that quickly, though. So here's kind of the definition of a landspout here, and then I'll try to kind of dive in to the differences here. So landspouts, they form, along the formation of some cloud cover. By stretching a boundary layer of vorticity upward into the cumulus, basically, the cloud updraft, okay? These are generally smaller and weaker than supercell tornadoes and do not form, and this is the important part here, and this is where we get a little nerdy and sciencey here, and I'll explain. Do not form from a mesocyclone or pre-existing rotation in the cloud. Because of this, landspouts are rarely detected by Doppler radar, okay? So I guess the best way I can explain this is tornadoes are formed because of a massive circulation that really kind of gets the thunderstorm circulating, and it then forms from the top down. And that goes back to the mesocyclone. Usually, you've heard us talk about, or maybe if you're interested and you watch, storm chaser videos and stuff, they'll mention a wall cloud that forms from this mesocyclone, and then eventually the wall cloud, rotating wall cloud, will spawn a funnel. Funnel can then touch down and create a tornado. Landspout is different. Landspout won't come from a rotating thunderstorm. In fact, most of these don't come from thunderstorms. They just come from a generic kind of cumulus-looking cloud. But it's created by kind of some steering winds that are rotating kind of at the surface. And you'll get this kind of scary-looking funnel that will come down from the cloud. And sometimes they look like they're getting pretty low. They have been known to touch the ground, but they rarely do. And they are short-lived. A lot of reason why is there's usually something that will kind of choke off that circulation, because as opposed to a tornado where you've got this massive rotating supercell thunderstorm that will create a tornado, this doesn't have that kind of upper level support. All right. When I was explaining to kids about this when we were allowed to go to schools and talk about it, I kind of think of it like you're sitting in a pool and you're kind of waving your hands around different directions, and then all of a sudden, if you do it just right, you'll get like a little whirly, you know what I'm talking about, a little funnel. And you're like, oh, that was cool. Because you're getting these boundaries that are kind of connecting with each other, interceding with each other, and then you'll get this kind of little spin up there. Kind of works the same way with landspouts a little bit. A funny story for you that I had, and I'd never really encountered a landspout in person. I was this was back in my days in Peoria. We were doing a live shot, as we typically did in the summer, in Washington, Illinois, which was also, side note, a town that was rolled by a massive tornado, an EF4 tornado in that November outbreak. And I'll spend some time talking about that in a later podcast. But we're doing a live shot, and I actually had my anchor, one of my anchors with us. I was working in the evenings at that point. I was the chief. So I was doing weather live. We had an anchor field anchoring, and it was their big festival that they had going on at the square in Washington. And during my downtime, I was sitting in the live truck doing radio hits for an AM station in the Bloomington Normal Market called WJBC. And so I would call in, I think, once an hour, and they had a couple of characters in the PM drive, and so we joke around a little bit and stuff like that. So as I'm doing that, there wasn't really, I think there was like maybe some little pop-up thunderstorm risks, but nothing significant. And the big story was, I think that day was like 95 and the humidity was ridiculously high. It was awful being outside. So I was trying to kind of stay out of the sun as well. So I have the door shut. There's no windows in this live truck. So I'm just kind of hanging out there by myself. And I'm on my cell phone doing this radio update. All right. And my anchor, who was there, he had just gotten done with an interview. He opens the door and he goes, "Hey, you need to come out and see this real quick." But I mean, I was talking on the radio, so I'm trying to like pay attention to him, but I'm still not, I'm still trying to do my talk back with the radio folks. And he's trying to signal to me I need to come outside and see this. And I'm like, "All right, give me 1 second, Bob." Bob Larson, he's now retired, legendary anchor in the Peoria television market. And I'm like, "All right, Bob, all right, just give me a second. I got to finish this real quick." And he's like, he's not going away. He's like, "You need to come here. I'm like, what could be going on, weather-wise that I need to go see out there? And finally, he grabs me by the shirt. And I'm on the phone, and I get out, and I look due south from the square in Washington, and I see this very low funnel cloud. And it was a pretty dark cloud, but I wouldn't call it like a thunderstorm. It wasn't that kind of sky. It was a dark gray cloud, so obviously it was a thick cumulus cloud. There was no rain shaft, but a very low-hanging, well-defined funnel that was dropping down. And I was like, "Oh my goodness!" And I think the radio guys were like, right in the middle of saying something. And I go, "Oh my goodness!" I go, "There's a funnel cloud here in Washington, guys. I gotta let you go. And I just hung up. And I heard the playback. They played it for me the next day because we had a lot of fun with it, obviously. But at that point, I didn't know what was going on. They did sound the sirens in Washington because there was a lot of people there. And so there was no tornado warning that was issued. And it's about a 15, 20-minute drive for me back into Peoria at the station. So I'm racing to get back. They're doing phoners with me because, they're not sure if this thing is going to be on the ground, how long it's going to be on the ground, whatever. So I'm racing to get back. Luckily, our weekend meteorologist was already there. So he starts going into kind of wall-to-wall coverage. We actually had video of it, so he was able to at least use that. So I get back. There's nothing on radar, and I'll explain a little bit more of that in a little bit. But, it was on. It never hit the ground. From any of the reports, it was one of about 3 or 4 that were getting reported that day in the central Illinois area. And a lot of that was from some of these little pop-up thunderstorms, and you ended up getting some of these outflow boundaries, and they merged together and kind of just created these quick little spin-ups. Now, you ended up getting a downpour in Washington about 10 minutes later, so what ended up happening, when it started raining, it cuts off that circulation from the landspout, and it's gone. But it's hard to tell. When you're at the surface, it's tough to know the difference because you see that funnel cloud. Now, a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times, those cold air funnels or those landspouts, if you will, are going to be a little bit higher up in the atmosphere. Not as typically low as what you would expect when you get a typical tornado. So that's one reason that it has a tough time reaching it to the ground, because by the time it kind of extends itself, that condensation funnel kind of going down, it already is, it's too late and the circulation is cut off. So that's one way you can kind of tell the difference a little bit. Obviously, if there's really no thunderstorm that it's attached to, it's more than likely kind of a cold air funnel or a landspout that's kind of coming down. What made that day difficult, and what I was trying to explain to my news director, he's like, what in the world was that, and how do we go about covering that? And I go, look, I was like, if we have live video, it's fascinating and it's scary to a lot of people. And look, emergency manager, rightfully so, sounded the sirens. You had people that were out there. I think people were going to scatter no matter what, just because it's a scary looking thing. You see a distinctive funnel cloud that's dropping down. But the problem as a meteorologist is concerned, both at the Weather Service and as a television meteorologist, is that you can't pick that up on radar. Radar on the early stages of a tornado can pick up the rotation of a supercell. But you have to remember that whole storm in itself is rotating, right? So it's going up several thousand feet. And so you're getting different layers of these radar scans of a supercell thunderstorm that is rotating. And only after that could you possibly maybe get some debris signatures and that kind of thing. But we would typically say, oh, there's a debris ball there, or you're looking at the correlation coefficient where you're getting maybe a debris signature there, that you're getting some sort of shot at possibly getting rotation on that. But even as I said, that these funnel clouds or these landspouts may be a little bit higher up, the cloud base may be a little bit higher up than maybe your typical supercell tornado, it's still too low for radar to detect, unless it was just right next to the radar. It's too low to detect the rotation from a radar. So you can't see anything. It's not going to look like anything to you if you're looking at that. So it's impossible to warn for these things, and it's impossible to track when you're on TV. You can only go based on reports of what the public is seeing, essentially. Now, in certain situations, you do know if that is a possibility. A lot of times, you may get those. Especially in the summertime, you may get those with like a big area of low pressure that's kind of tightly wound, because you're already kind of getting the atmosphere to spin a little bit. And that low may just be enough to agitate maybe some thunderstorms developing, and some of those thunderstorms can kind of create their own little outflow boundaries. And so that's what you need at the surface, is to kind of get those quick little spin ups, and then there you go. And then you possibly get some of that formation of those landspouts. But they happen frequently. They really do. Usually more so in rural areas than, and there's no rhyme or reason why. We've seen them over the city before, but typically a lot of the videos I ended up seeing is it's over rural areas and stuff like that. So it's something that will likely never be warned. I think I did see in my time in Illinois, I think one did get warned. It wasn't the Washington one, ironically enough. And what's funny is we ended up going through probably about 3 or 4 days in a row of these landspouts in the Peoria area, central Illinois area. Didn't get any warnings for them except for maybe one. But people were on guard on it, because we made a huge deal about it during our newscast, because I think we were the only station that actually caught it live, since we were live in Washington. And then we also had other videos coming in, I think, from some of the surrounding areas around Bloomington and Pontiac and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, they happen. They're kind of freaky. Emergency managers, I think, are going to use their discretion. And it's rightfully so, because, it's a fine line. I always am, I get on my soapbox sometimes on how aggressive sometimes the sirens are sounded, and there's no universal protocol from county to county. And that's not just dogging on Indiana. It was that way in Illinois. It was that way in Ohio. And I think, there's just confusion, especially in the day and age where people live in one county but work in another and all that kind of stuff. There's just confusion. I think you need to simplify things. I'll get off my soapbox, but emergency managers do have a role in protecting the public, and you have to take any threat seriously. And even though I can say landspouts rarely hit the ground, rarely is not never. And if they do hit the ground or maybe touch the top of a house, it's not going to do massive damage, but it could pull off some shingles. It could rip off some tree limbs. You could have some minor injuries there. You got kids playing outside and stuff. There's some liability there. So I get where you need to kind of sound sirens for that kind of thing. But, having a universal tornado warning for that kind of thing, that's tough because you can't see it on radar. Those things are so short-lived. You've got a fine line as a National Weather Service meteorologist that you don't want to have too many false warnings, right? There's already so many, and there's the public, I think, already says, well, and because we see it all the time as a television station that covers a large area. And look, if we break into coverage, we're going to get chewed out by somebody because we're interrupting their show. Because, Polygon in the grand scheme of things in our coverage area is a very small area. And so they're saying, well, why do I care what's happening in Rushville? I live in Indianapolis. That storm's moving away from us. You're interrupting our programming. And so people already get this kind of sense that, look how many times they break in for tornado warnings. It's never impacted us. Look how many times my weather radio's gone off because I'm in this Polygon, but nothing's happened here. So, there is a fine line that the Weather Service has to kind of walk. And I think for good reason, they don't usually warn for those type of events. You should be on guard. Something you should definitely watch if you have a landspout that kind of forms near you. But I definitely don't think it's one of those where we need to activate tornado warnings and weather radios and all that stuff, because I think we're overly sensitized is not the word I'm looking for. I think the public just gets kind of tired of, the warning sometimes, that you got to be very careful. And I've always said, if I go on Facebook Live, it's going to be for a good reason. And I try to kind of, limit that. If I'm going to get more engagement on Facebook Live, if I go on Facebook, if I go live more often, yes, most definitely. And that is being pressed, not just by our station, but by all stations across the country. Social media is king right now. But I think, trying to stay in line with my philosophies in terms of weather, I've always said that I'm not going to go on Facebook Live unless there's a darn good reason for it. Or I'm going to put kind of disclaimer and say, hey, I'm just jumping on, haven't talked to you guys in a while. Here's what's up. But otherwise I'm going to be on Facebook Live for some sort of significant weather event, whether it be in the winter time. And I seem to do more in the winter, but we'll do some in the spring if we get some nasty weather as well. So that's kind of the lowdown on the difference between a landspout and a tornado here. So we're in the season now where they happen really at any time. I always laugh when we say cold air funnels, and majority of the cold air funnels, quote unquote, that I've seen have happened in 90-degree heat. So not really cold air, right? So landspouts, or however you want to kind of phrase them, we're in that season that we see them a little more frequently, and that kind of carries over all the way into fall before it starts getting a little too chilly. So be on guard, but don't be afraid. If you see those and we post about them, that's what those are, landspouts. So hopefully you learned a little bit something here. We'll have that forecast coming up for you here for the last week of July. That's coming up next year on Weather Weekly. Your forecast here for the final week of July, the week of July 26th, hot and humid. And really, we're going to kind of start ramping up the humidity as we head into the middle of the week. As this podcast drops on a Wednesday, we're going to be near 90 degrees and pretty muggy with more tropical air inbound. And I think we've got another hot day on tap for Thursday as well, with highs in the upper 80s. I think the saving grace may be a cold front moving in, that increase in some cloud cover, and along with that, some showers and storms. There is a possibility for maybe a few strong storms as we head into Thursday afternoon and Thursday evening, with some gusty winds along that front that's going to be moving on through. But I'll tell you what, just pack some patience. If you're wanting a little more refreshing air, I think you're going to like this forecast, because once we get past Thursday, we're back down to highs in the low 80s for Friday and Saturday, and the humidity is going to be much lower. We're talking dew points in the upper 50s and low 60s. That's not bad for the end of July, especially with those temperatures. So we should be in good shape there. And really no significant warm-ups as we go into the weekend here. Sunday may be a bit warmer, along with Monday into the mid-80s. I do have just kind of a chance for showers on Sunday, but I think they're isolated at best. So we're starting to dry things out. You're going to need to kind of water the lawns, water the garden there, and we're starting to get a little dry after such a soaking start to the month of July. And then it looks like another pretty significant cool down heading our way by the end of the 8-day forecast. By Tuesday, I only had highs in the 70s. So that's really nice. And you have to consider a lot of kids now. I know my kids are going back to school the day this podcast drops here, the 28th. We're going to start seeing more school districts within the next week here starting to go back in central Indiana. Seems so early. And I'm not going to go on a rant. I could, but I'm not, because this is a weather podcast and not a dad ranting podcast. But it always seemed to me, at least we got through the state fair before we went back to school when I was a kid, which, by the way, the state fair kicks off this Friday. And as I mentioned, Friday and Saturday should be beautiful days. Hopefully you can head out there. 6 to 10 day outlook here. Temperature wise, equal chance for above or below average temperatures. So no real signs of anything significant either way. Looks like we have maybe a slightly above average chance for above average precipitation. Temperature outlook for the next 8 to 14 days. So this will take us nearly to the middle of August. We do have a slight chance for above average temperatures for the first half of the month, and a decent shot for above average precipitation for the month of August, which would not be a bad thing. Usually August, not a typically super wet month, so we could use a little bit of rain here and there, but not too much, as we're kind of getting near the end of the growing season for some of the farmers, although some of them will do it a little bit later. It's been a pretty good year. I've just driven around for the most part. Corn looks great. Beans look good. A lot of green. So it's good stuff there. So let's look at the forecast as we wrap up the month of July. My thanks to you for joining me here for this episode of Weather Weekly. We always appreciate your time. We always love to hear your feedback as well. You can reach me anytime at email marcus.bailey@wishtv.com. Social media also good. Marcus Bailey Weather on Facebook, and at Marcus Bailey on Instagram and Twitter. We hope to see you and hear you next time for next week's episode of Weather Weekly. And don't forget to check out all our other great podcasts right now on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Discover more from Storm Track 8 Weather and Wish TV. Online at wishtv.com, and when you follow Wish TV on Facebook. Plus, be sure to check out more great podcasts from the All Indiana Podcast Network now at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.